Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a very important night for our students who have accommodations at Rhinebeck High School and who are seeking out accommodations for the ACT or SAT, which is a college entrance examination that's required at some schools as part of the college application process for the upcoming school year. My name is Susan Hannon. I'm the K-12 School Counseling Department Chairperson, and I'm here with Andrea Katz.
Hi, I'm Andrea Katz. I'm one of the special education teachers in the middle school and high school, and I kind of handle the school-based testing at Rhinebeck.
Okay, so what are we going to be talking about tonight? So we'll be talking about the ACT and SAT, the national dates. You'll see that there are numerous dates to take either test throughout the year, and we recommend that students probably take the test twice. We'll talk about the different types of testing there are. There's testing national. We are not a test site at Rhinebeck High School, so if you qualify for national testing, you'll take it at one of the local high schools. And then there's school-based testing, which takes place on our Rhinebeck campus. Then we'll talk about testing registration process. They're different for the College Board SAT test and the ACT test, so we'll talk about those. We'll share some of the test prep companies that are in the area in case that's the way you want to prepare for the tests, and we'll talk about other ways to prep. And then we'll talk about the different types of learning disability support programs at the colleges because every student will require a different level of support when they enter college starting in September of 2023. Okay, so we're going to get started. So we're going to first talk about the major differences between the SAT and the ACT. Okay, so there's a couple of key differences. We'll start at the top. The SAT is more algebra based, so it has fewer geometry questions, whereas the ACT has a lot more of the geometry questions. So you have to think to yourself, am I stronger in geometry or am I stronger in algebra-based questions? The SAT provides more time per question, whereas the ACT is a faster paced exam. You kind of know it or you don't, and then you move on, where the SAT, they want you to think a little bit more about it, which is why they give you more time. The SAT does have a non-calculator math section, whereas the ACT, you're allowed to use a calculator for the entire exam. And the ACT has a separate science section, whereas the SAT does not. So we'll start on the left-hand side. The overall timing is about the same, as you can see, 3 hours versus 2 hours and 55 minutes. And then you can see how it's broken down. The reading section is longer, more time on that on the SAT. And then the writing and English sections are relatively similar for both, and they both cover somewhat of the same material. And the math section is longer, one long section for the ACT, but it's broken down into two sections on the SAT. And one of those, again, is without a calculator. And then as you can see, the ACT does have that science section. Please note that science and humanities is included in the reading sections on both tests, but the separate science section is worth 35 minutes. And you can see the number of points per exam. One exam is out of 1,600. That's the SAT, and the ACT is out of 36 points. So we talked a little bit about the math. You can see the number of questions is about the same over the sections that are offered. And you can see that there's a little bit less time. 60 seconds is what they recommend for the ACT versus almost a minute and a half for the SAT. The good news with the SAT is that they do provide a reference table for formulas, so you don't have to memorize as many formulas, whereas the ACT, you do need to be familiar with the different types of formulas that will be asked in their mathematics section. There's the focus. You can see only 6% of the SAT is geometry, where the ACT is 23%. So that's a pretty big difference. Again, think about your strengths in math and which test might be better. The reading section, the SAT has more questions, and more of them are also vocabulary based. So think to yourself, how's my vocabulary? Which test would be better for me in that regards? We look at the passage complexity. So this is how difficult are the reading passages? And the biggest one to look at here is the average grade level. So the SAT, the grade level of their complexity is actually post high school, whereas the ACT is middle of 11th grade, which is where you all are right now. So that's what they'll be testing. The number of passages is important too. Are you a good reader? Can you stay focused? Because the SAT has 5 passages, whereas the ACT only has 4 passages. And they do cover somewhat of the same topics, but each of the passages will focus on one of those areas, whether it be literature, prose, humanities, social sciences, whatever it might be. Before I continue, I just would like to say that if you do have any questions, we are available for emailing in questions. So feel free to email me, which is shannon@rhineck.org at any time, and we'll stop what we're doing if it's relevant to our topic, or we'll hold on to it at the end. So again, that's shannon@rhineck.org. The writing and the English section, we already kind of talked about a little bit about the percent of the vocabulary and the amount of time. And then we have the complexity we talked about. And then also in this slideshow, it kind of compares the 2 exams. Students, you have taken a pre-ACT back in October of your sophomore year, and this year you took the pre-ACT. So you can use this to kind of compare your scores. If one is higher on the left, then that's a better test for you taking the SAT. If your score is higher on the right, then you'll probably be better off taking the ACT. Our students often will take one of each just to give each a try, but through the school counseling office, we do recommend staying with one test, because the more practice you get with one, perhaps the better you will do. So if you have any questions about the testing, please send those in. Otherwise, we're going to talk about when you should take the test with all the dates coming up with Mrs. Katz will share in a second. But I will say that if you are taking Algebra 2 this year, your best bet is to take it as late in the spring as possible, because Algebra 2 and Trig are on both tests. If you're in Geometry B, you can take that as well at the end of this year. And if you happen to be in the pre-calculus class, you can take that anytime, because you already have covered the math that's on both exams. Okay, the last one is that as we will apply for your accommodations for the exams, but we can't do so without your consent. And there's a link here at the bottom. We will share this slideshow, but at the tomorrow on our website, so you can look at that. But you can see we need consent from both the parent and the student on both the ACT and the SAT in order to apply for accommodations, as we can't share your confidential information without your help. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Katz.
Yeah, hi. So as Ms. Hannon said, our school recommends that you take the test at a minimum of 2 times. You know, practice makes perfect. So probably once in the spring and once again, or once or twice in the fall of your senior year. This slide shows the dates. The dates in black are the dates for the remainder of this school year. Please note the ACT is not given in New York in July. So the dates are through the school year in June. The dates on the bottom, which we have noted in red, are the dates for next school year through kind of the mid-year of next year. But they are in red because they are tentative as of now. They are posted on both the ACT and SAT sites, but again, they are marked as tentative, so we can't confirm those as the solid dates just yet. So again, Ms. Hannon said you should wait closer to the end of the school year when you're completing that math. Please note, though, remember that we have finals and regents coming up, so you might not want to wait to the June, maybe the May or April exam. That's something for you to discuss with your counselor on how busy your testing for that final season might be. So when you take tests, these College Board tests, there's national testing versus school-based testing. National testing is at a national, held at a national testing site. Rhineck is not a national testing site. Writing students usually register to take tests at local schools, whether it be at Mamaroneck or New Rochelle or whatever the closest and most available testing center there is. There's limited seating for tests that you would have to register, and they note the attendance. So you would go on either site, which we'll show you shortly, and register for the tests. School-based testing is noted as special testing. Special testing is done really at school. And if you have any kind of accommodation beyond extended time, or a medical issue or test read or anything outside the norm of, or the extra time, it's usually handled in school, where I would work with the student and the counselor to come up with a mutually acceptable time. It usually coincides with the national testing date, and I have about a 2-week window in which to administer a test under special testing conditions.
Okay, we have a question that came up, which is how fast can we get the accommodations for the ACT? And we're going to talk about the differences of applying for the tests. So hold tight, we'll get to that answer in just one second. And here it is. I forgot this was the next slide. So what do you do now? So you're going to register for one or both tests. If you are taking the ACT, we ask that you look at the schedule and decide which one you might be taking, and do that as soon as possible. The reason is because you cannot request accommodations for the ACT until you actually register for a test. Those of you that had accommodations last year, the counselors applied for your accommodations and they were submitted and a decision was already made. So that's already banked.
That's for the SAT.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, that's for the SAT. So the SAT can be taken. You can register for that test at any time because you already have your accommodations. But the ACT, you need to register. Then we get an email, and then we can apply for accommodations. So if you are thinking of that April test, the sooner you get that in, the better. Because if you don't get the accommodations you want, it gives us a little bit of time to actually put in an appeal to try again and get those tests. Try to get those test accommodations. We do not give the accommodation. It's these test companies. It's up to them based on the information we submit, and the information we submit is all of your paperwork and testing that you have in the special education office, which is an IEP, a 504, and any other types of testing that you've had. If you're applying for more competitive colleges, we do suggest that you sign up to take it with the writing. They both offer a writing section. Some of it's being phased out, but it might be helpful because if your college requires it, you'll have it. But those are going to be the much more competitive colleges. If you're not looking at those, then you don't have to register for the one with writing. After you register, you definitely want to prepare and study for the test. And then on the side, you want to be researching those colleges that you're interested in, or researching colleges that offer the different types of academic support that we'll explain in just a bit. Okay?
So as Ms. Hannon said, accommodations have been requested and approved for most 11th graders for when they took the pre-SAT through College Board. So that's really done. But to register for the test, there's a link. Go to supplied on this PowerPoint to create an account and indicate that you have already been approved for accommodations. And you, the student, and the family will get the letter indicating all the decisions. So once those letters come through, make sure you share it with your counselor so they know that those accommodations have been added to your test registration. The ACT is a little bit different right now because, as Ms. Hannon said, we have to first put in for accommodations once you register for a test. So the registration process for the ACT is, I wouldn't say so simple, but you link follow the link, you sign into ACT, and you're going to create an account. As you're registering for a test, there'll be a portion where you will indicate that you are a student who is with a disability and who is looking for accommodations when it's prompted to do so. As Ms. Hannon said, once you do that and register, we, the school, will get a notice, an email saying that you have registered and you are looking for accommodations. And that's when the counselors and I kind of step in and start applying for those accommodations. Again, a little bit different when those accommodations are approved. Both the school and you will receive a letter notifying you of your accommodations that have been approved through ACT.
Okay, we have another question that came in asking about, do you think tests will be required for admission? And we're going to get to that in just a second.
It might be even the next slide. Let's see.
It might be. I can't remember them. And then I have a question that says, in your experience, how closely does performance on the pre-ACT and pre-SAT correlate with performances on the actual tests? Both of those tests give the score of the test, but it also gives a predicted score. And that predicted score is always higher because with more schooling from the time you took the test till you take the real one, that's taken into account, plus the fact that the students, most of you, if not all of you, did not study for either of those tests. So there is an anticipation that the scores will go up. So I hope that answers that question. If it doesn't, please send it in again. The other question is whether or not you can super score, or as this person said, cherry pick which scores to send. For the SAT, almost all of the time, yes, it's called super score. You can, if you take it more than once, you can send them the highest score in the math section and the highest score in the critical reading section, so that your score, maybe you got 1,000 on your first try, but then the next one you did higher in math, you would then put that math score in, and then your score would go up. The ACT, they don't always allow that. So each college has its own way that they do that. So sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it has to be just your overall score, which is an average of the 4 subtests. So that's it depends on the actual college for those. Okay.
So I know a question just came in on how or if schools are requiring the test. So if you go through this, click through this link, you'll see that currently there's over 1,800 schools that are not requiring either the SAT or the ACT for high school seniors applying to college. Again, if you click on the website, you'll actually see a list of the schools. So if there's a school that you're interested in, you can actually see Ms. Hannah-Thillian, the database of the schools that are test optional at this time.
You can sort this list too by state if that's easier than by name. So, you can look at that. So just to give you just a general idea, if I sort it by state and you click through down to New York, you can see New York is one of the states that have many, many, many options for students who will be applying test optional. New York starts here. I'm already scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So 1,800 is a pretty good number. Before the pandemic hit, it was just over 1,000. So I would anticipate that number holding steady, if not increasing over time, as colleges get used to reading applications without the test scores. Did have another question come in that's asking, once you're approved for an ACT, does that keep you approved for the future tests?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Once you are approved for the ACT or accommodations through ACT, those accommodations stay for subsequent tests. So once we get that approval in, if you take it again, like Ms. Hammond said, in maybe April, it will hold for all subsequent exams. But again, the earlier you apply and register for that exam, the better chance of securing the accommodations that we have for them on their IEPs or 504 plans. it just gives us a buffer time if we need to appeal or send in more documentation supporting the requests. So Rhineck itself does not have any kind of preparation courses or school class to prepare for both either the ACT or the SAT. Here's a list in
let me just jump in real quick, Ms. Katz. That's because of the number of tests that they're out there and the number of kids who want to do test prep. We tried many times over many years, and the test prep companies would come into our school to help, but we only had 1 or 2 students sign up, and it wasn't enough for a class. So I just wanted to reiterate, that's why we don't offer them at our school, just because there's not enough interest because of the size of the school. We will keep revisiting that as time goes on, and as we expand, perhaps sometime in the future, we may have enough kids
bring
who
that back.
Yeah.
We provided a list of test preparation companies. As you see, the top few are free. And then we put them in alphabetical order below that. No particular push for any one or any course. Some are to do on your own. Some are online. Some are in a classroom setting. Again, through the pandemic, some of those prep courses might have changed their format. The best bet is to actually ask other friends, or if you've had other students who you feel that you have similar learning styles with, see what they did and how they best prepared for these classes, these tests. I'm sorry.
And you don't need a test prep company. You don't need to pay to do testing. There are books, there's online resources. There's plenty of things that you can do that are free, but you definitely need to do some sort of prep. Just wanted to pass that along. Study groups, anything of that sense. I have another question here that says, if a student applies to test optional schools, do you still recommend taking the test? I do not. If you feel that testing is not going to be helpful for you as part of this process, you can either just not test and resign yourself to saying, I'm going to apply to just test optional schools. Remember, there are 1,800 of them. Or you can still take a test now, see how you do, and then you can decide whether you're going to submit that test to any or all or 1 or 2 of your schools. That's going to be up to you. A lot of students do like to at least try the testing to see how they do. But I've had a few students this year who just didn't bother because they knew they would have tons of options and really didn't want to get into taking the test and doing all that prep work. Okay, so the different types of learning disability programs. So this is going to be part of your research. The most comprehensive one, these are structured programs where there's a separate admissions process. You need to be accepted into them. There's also an additional fee, and your progress is monitored by advisors, sort of like if you have a supervisory teacher, which most of you do. It's going to be a little bit like that. And there's just a very limited number of students who are accepted into these programs. So they're small programs because they want to have that low staff to student ratio. The other one is what most of our students are looking for, and that's the coordinated self-directed services. Usually there's no extra fee, and you will just have to work with the disability office. It comes under many different names. And you go there, you bring them your IEP from high school, your exit IEP or your exit 504, you bring it with you. You talk to them about the accommodations that you're looking for, and the schools will decide which accommodations they can afford to give you at the school. But you have to do that. Students have to be their own advocate. And you'll hear more about that in your senior final as a CSE or 504 meeting at the end of, actually around this time of next year. Okay. You go ahead.
And I was going to go to our final slide.
Okay, then I just want to jump in really quick. This slideshow will be distributed on the school counseling website tomorrow at some point. We'll have this available so you can see the rest of the slides. And this recording will also be on YouTube, ready to view at any time. So you can go back and revisit it as much as you'd like. And so you can also see the slides there and our explanation of the slides.
So just we call them handouts because we thought we were going to be live. So we've provided links so you can print at home, the consent for both the ACT and SAT, as Ms. Hannon said, to release your confidential information that's found in your IEP or 504, that blue and red comparison of the ACT and SAT is there, and then really very big descriptions of both what the SAT and the ACT look like, much more detailed. So I guess that's now it's your homework to see, and definitely reach out to both myself or your child's guidance counselor to kind of steer you in the right direction.
Okay, so that's what we have for you. We're ending this now. All the questions have been answered, and we're going to move. I'm going to log out of this Google Meet, and I'm going to pop into the next one for the 7:00 English speaking junior meeting. Mrs. Katz, thank you for your help with this.
Thank you.
Again,
if you have any questions, please reach out, acats@Rhinebeck.
And of course, hopefully know where to find me at this point. So just keep that in mind. Just one really quick question. So do you think they'll still look at, if schools are saying that their test optional, do you think they'll still look at the SATs that are submitted, and hence those who submit a good score might then have possibly be accepted? If you submit it and you want them to look at it, you have to let them know if you want them to look at it or not. So that's going to be up to you. And if your score is not within their middle 50% range or higher, then you probably don't want to submit that. That you can talk about with your junior in their junior meeting. And does the fall 22 represent the class that the current junior year is applying? Those are the numbers for the kids that are going into college this year. But like I said, I think that number is going to hold pretty steady for you guys. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'll see you in a minute. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Junior College Night. I'm so glad you can all join us for this very, very important informational meeting. I'm Susan Hannon. I'm the K-12 School Counseling Department Chairperson, and with me are counselors Amanda Menke and Evan Miller, and some very special guests. So, counselors, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks for hopping on, everybody.
Okay, so students, before we even get started, now's the time to pull out those folders that you received in your CCP classes this week, because you can use them as a reference as we go through the evening. So families, tonight is a chance for you to get your questions answered by experts on the other side of the desk about this college application process. We do have prepared questions, but we really want you to walk away with more answers than questions. So please feel free to email me, shannon@rhineck.org. That's my work email address. And we will pose those questions as they come along to our panelists. Ms. Mackey is going to be handling those questions for us. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists who will introduce themselves. We have Lori Austin from Lehman College, Craig Broccoli from Binghamton University, Kevin McKenna from Sarah Lawrence College, and Erica Padilla from the University of Rochester. Lori, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So great that you're here with us tonight. Again, I am Lori Austin. I have been at Lehman College as Director of Admissions for 13 years. And prior to that, I was Director of Recruitment for CUNY at the central office. So I'm also quite familiar with all of the CUNY colleges and have worked before that at both public and private universities. So thank you so much, Susan. And I look forward to talking with all of you tonight.
Thanks. How about you, Craig?
And hello, everybody. I'm Craig Broccoli with Binghamton University. So slightly different than CUNY, the SUNY system, but still part of the state system here in New York. I'm actually based here in New York City, not too far away from you all, as the Associate Director of Admissions. But over the years, got to travel all over the world for Binghamton. I went to Binghamton for my undergrad and grad study. So I come at this from a bigger public perspective, but happy to share some insight as we get into some of the nuances of the college admissions experience. So
Thanks, Craig. Kevin?
Great. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for joining us. My name's Kevin McKenna. I'm Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at Sarah Lawrence College. So Sarah Lawrence is in Bronxville, also pretty close to y'all. And I've been there for about 8 years. We're representing small private college, so add to the mix here among us tonight. And apart from being at Sarah Lawrence the last couple of years, I've also worked in fields like international admissions and graduate admissions. So happy to contribute whatever answers I can to the questions you all have.
Great. Erica?
Hey, folks. I'm Erica Buddy. I'm the Regional Associate Director of Admission for the New York metro area for the University of Rochester, which is a very long way of saying that, much like Craig, I'm also regional and local. I actually live and work from my home in Westchester County, so really, really close, though far away because of all that's going on right now. I've been at admissions about 21 years. I've been at Rochester about 4 of those, working at different institutions, small liberal arts, large comprehensive, all private, and now at the University of Rochester, a Tier 1 research institution. So I'm happy to share some of that experience and give you some perspectives based on that. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, so
Did we lose Susan?
You did.
and she's back.
and I'm back. Wow, that has never happened. Okay. All right. So, Ms. Mankey, do we have any questions yet?
I do not see any questions as of yet, but I will be thoroughly monitoring emails.
Okay, so I'm going to get some things started off with. So let's just start with maybe we'll have panelists, maybe one, two, maybe three of you could answer each one. And if you're going to say the same thing, we'll just skip on to the next. There's going to be plenty of questions, so everybody gets a chance to jump in. So we'll start with who wants to talk about the general qualities that make a candidate desirable, maybe beyond their grades or scores. Like what makes a student stand out besides the numbers? Oh, Erica, you're on mute.
I was just thinking, who's going to go first as we all look at each other? I think in general, this period that we're all living through, the pandemic, is a great example of how a student can stand out beyond grades and scores, because there are so many challenges, and it's about turning this really difficult situation into something that making the best of it, trying to be enterprising also with your time, and finding other ways that you can still perhaps be involved in your community. So those are the types of things that we're looking for. Holistic review is a term that you hear often in admissions, especially now with not having access to test scores and so many institutions moving to being test optional. So holistic review specifically means that we're looking at more than just your grades and your test scores. What academic choices have you made in school? Why have you made some of those choices based on just availability of coursework? And then, are you someone who's academically curious? Or are you interested in things, genuinely curious, and maybe exploring on your own independently? Certainly students that are now, with all that's happening and restrictions, cannot possibly go out to participate in certain activities if they're limited, but you've taken on new roles at home, you've taken on new roles in your community. Those are the types of things that we want to know about, because we all talk about leadership, but it certainly expresses itself in a lot of different ways. So we're looking for students that are, what are you doing with your time, and how can you bring those things to our community and contribute those to our community and our campuses?
Great. Anybody else want to chime in? You can raise your hand. It might be easier.
You know what? I think everything Erica said is spot on. I would also just volunteer this too, to add to it, that there's no singular formula or sort of secret recipe that we're looking for in how to stand out. We're looking for a lot of different kinds of students at our institutions, because we know that some of the best and most vibrant learning comes when people who've had a lot of different kinds of experiences all share and learn in the same space. And so if you're looking for a specific activity or a specific kind of best foot forward, I'm going to challenge you to think about what are the things that you like to do the best, and what are the things that excite you the best about thinking about your time in college, because that's going to come off in your voice better and more true than trying to fit a formula. I was a music student in college, and so I use the orchestra analogy a lot. You need more than just violinists to play most orchestral repertoire. And so a lot of colleges are looking for a lot of different kinds of students with a lot of different interests. So think about those things that are most exciting to you, and don't put too much stress or anxiety on what are the specifics that I should be showcasing.
Great. Okay, well, here's another one. Just a reminder, if you have questions, send those to me at shannon@rhineac.org, and we'll get those questions answered. Because I'm not applying to college, but we came up with some of these questions, and these are what we think are important, but they may not be what you might think are important. So we want to make sure your questions get answered. So one of the top questions that's been coming up is this whole test optional. And everybody's test optional now. Will you, and in your experience, will you and your colleagues across other schools, colleges, and universities, what's your opinion about them sticking with the test optional moving forward? We know that there's over 1,800 schools test optional for the fall already. Who wants to talk about whether or not you're test optional, and how do you evaluate an application without test scores?
I'd like to start. CUNY is actually test blind. So since the pandemic started, because so many students were unable to take the SATs or ACTs, we do not consider test scores at all. And that will continue for the next year. And at that point, we will reevaluate whether we're going to become test optional or require SATs again. And I expect that we will probably be test optional. So it has forced us to look much more closely at a student's actual academic subject grades than we did before. And we've done a lot of studies to show which particular grades and which subjects are most predictive of success. And so, we do look at everything a student has accomplished. In high school, we look at how much they've challenged themselves. In addition, are they taking honors classes and AP classes? And CUNY's a little bit different because at the undergrad level, other than the honors college, we really don't require an essay. So we really are looking much more at the student's transcript than some other schools do.
Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I will add, maybe from again from a public side, that we at Binghamton and SUNY across the board is test optional right now for the last 2 years, but that decision about the future is usually very much top down, state level decision on what will happen next. But the key piece here, I think, in the world that we're living in, is understanding what options are in this case, and if optional in this case, it means you had that opportunity to submit it or not submit it. Or in some cases, take it or not take the exam. Whatever the future has in store, and there will be schools that are test optional, and there were schools pre-COVID that were test blind to begin with. Think about this more so from your own personal academic trajectory and strategy. I always tell students, prepare for them. Don't bank on a bunch of schools not needing them. Prepare for them, and if they are test optional, the schools that are on your list in the future, and you did well or relatively well on those exams, great, you have that. And if you didn't, well, and the schools on your list, some of them are test optional, then you have that option. But when it comes down to it, the colleges, the vast majority that quickly adopted this test optional policy, agreed to read students in a fair way between the two scenarios, whether you had them or not. And maybe to get down to a music analogy again, right? We're looking at what's in front of us and what you're good at, right? Academically, test scores and your overall performance in high school are the two big academic metrics. It's always been most important to focus in on your academic trajectory in high school and your transcript and the work you've done. If you did well on exams and you wanted to have that supplied in, great. You're a really talented test taker. That's another piece. Think about it the same way. If you're really good at playing the flute and you wanted to share that with the college admissions team and they really wanted to see some talented flute players, that helps. But if you're not good at the flute, or you're not good at playing it, you probably don't want to submit that. And that doesn't mean that we don't want non-good flute players. It just means we're not going to focus on that part. We're going to focus on the other pieces.
Thank you. Thank you. Miss Menke, I see you.
Yes, I am going to hop in. I have some great questions so far, with the first being which accommodations your college may be able to offer for students who have an IEP.
Well, I'll jump into that. We offer a lot of services for students that have IEPs. And we immediately connect students with our office that specializes in that area. And, everything from test taking, helping with test taking, note taking, really a full array depending on the student's needs. So I feel it's really important, if a student does have those needs and needs support, that they should be very upfront about that. It would certainly not work against you in any way. We want students to be successful and receive any and all services that we offer.
I'll jump in here. The important thing to note is also that all the services that you received in high school are not necessarily all going to be available when you get to college. Things are going to change a little bit depending on the environment that you're going into. So I think in many ways, what type of resources and supports you want to get should definitely play a big role in your search process, because you want to make sure that those are available on the campuses. And then in my experience, students were that have had support in school have actually gotten really good at self-advocating and reaching out to the right people. And we can help connect you to the right people on our campuses that can actually help answer those questions for you. As Laura mentioned, it doesn't play a role in the admissions process in any way, but it is important that you know what's offered and whether or not it meets your needs. And also what other types of things perhaps you had never found that you needed that are suddenly available at the university that you're looking at. So certainly a little bit more homework, a little more research involved in the process, but rely on the admissions office as your point of contact to get that ball rolling.
Okay, and the next question, many of the juniors this year have transcripts that do not reflect their true academic capabilities due to being virtual for a year and a half. Although their junior year grades are good, their cumulative GPA may be low. Are you taking that into consideration, and how?
Oh, I can start this because I think this is a great question that reflects back to some of the changes that we've had to make in our admissions offices in becoming even more holistic. Even those of us that had holistic reading processes have really had to focus on looking not just at sort of your GPA, but we have your transcript open. We have the courses that are available to you at your school open. And we have the context of knowing that this pandemic has been disruptive. And all of those things are sort of acting as lenses at the same time for how we're evaluating the work you've done. I think that there used to be the sort of fairly straightforward comment that we would say, college admissions offices like upward trajectories. We know that spotless transcripts are hard to come by, few and far between. There's some grade you wish you had done better on. And even now, that notion of a straightforward upward trajectory, depending on where you were and how the pandemic impacted your school at what time, we know that might not be as linear of a story as maybe it would have been. I will say this: you do have time to show us who you are as a student when it comes time to fill that application out and when it comes time to make your course selection. So you're doing this as juniors and you've actually got time, and we know that a lot of academic growth happens between your second semester junior year and when you enroll in college. So I would say, please trust me or trust us when we say we're working as hard as we can to contextualize all this. You're not alone in feeling like there may be bumps in your academic story. You've got time to be able to tell us and relate to us the kind of student that you want to be at our institution. So it's not as straightforward as the upward trajectory used to be, but we're reading all of these things sort of open at the same time.
Super quick, just to back up what Kevin said. Number one, our profile, and you can look at the current profile on the school counseling website, will tell you what we've written this year for this year's seniors as part of the profile, which talks about how things were handled at Rhinebeck during the 2020 school year, 2021 school year, and this school year. And that will continue to be on the profile. And the second thing that Kevin talked about was course selection. And you have an opportunity to, with picking up your classes, juniors, that's right around the corner. You'll be picking your courses on February 1st, and that's going to be part of our next steps at the end. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I was actually just going to mention there's a direct line between our offices usually and your college advising office, your guidance office. So we know if we have a question who to go to and fill in the gaps. So to Kevin's point that we're trying to do our homework and meet you where you are and contextualize everything, we use our resources, and they are by far our best resource and yours as well. So definitely rely on them for all the information you might need.
Okay. And then, do colleges do in-person or virtual interviews for applicants?
You can all answer that, actually. Why doesn't everybody tell us what you do at your schools?
Okay. Can I start? So right now we're doing virtual, and hopefully we'll be doing in person soon. But it is not an interview where we are interviewing the student. It's really an informational session so that the student can ask us a lot of questions and find out if Lehman or any other CUNY school offers what they want and what they need. So try to approach it in that way. You know, you are the person buying the education, and we want to make sure that all of your questions are answered. So you walk away really having a good sense of whether this college is a good match for you. That's the most important thing.
Craig, why don't you go? What do you do at Binghamton?
So we don't have an interview process. It's not part of our review. I think it's important for the schools that do offer it, and they emphasize that. But the virtual world allowed us, technologically wise, to provide a platform for you to communicate with us in ways that you might not have normally been able to. So we allow students to zoom in and have a meeting with an admissions representative. It's not an interview, similar as Lori mentioned, but it's a good opportunity for you to think about, especially for schools that you're really curious or really serious about. But that would just be part of our normal admissions getting to know you, not part of your admissions decision part of the process.
Right. Great. Erica, you want to chime in with what do you do?
We are hosting interviews at Rochester. They're virtual. We host, you could do an interview with an admissions officer, with an alum, and then we also have senior interviewers. At Rochester, the interviews are evaluative, so they can play part of your admissions process. They're not required, they're optional, but they're a great way to go back to that point of just contextualizing, filling in the gaps, and letting us know about things that perhaps you didn't have a place to elaborate upon on the application. The interview presents a place in which you can do that, and also ask us questions. So it's not just us getting to know you, it's also you getting to know more about the institution.
Kevin, anything different with you?
Oh, very similar to Rochester. They're all virtual. We open them up for rising seniors in late May, early June, most of the time. And so you'll be able to start signing up for them then. We expect, regardless of whatever our on-campus visit options are, that we're going to keep the interviews virtual for next year, because we have found that it's just made it much easier to sort of take the hassle out of having to come to campus to do it. And we use mostly senior interviewers for that conversation at Sarah Lawrence. Also optional.
Okay, so there's informative, evaluative, and many different people who do different types of interviews. So you can see it depends on the school. So that's, again, where your research comes in. We have another question, which is, what are the best strategies to identify your target schools? Anybody want to jump at that one? So when students are coming up with their list, how do they figure out, the reaches are always pretty easy to see which ones are reaches. Your likelies sometimes are pretty easy, but how do you figure out, do you have any advice to help them try to figure out which schools might be in their target zone? Go for it, Craig.
So the target zone is always the one that is actually the trickiest to figure out, as you kind of mentioned there. And it's one that I definitely think you should spend most of your time focusing on, right? We tend to always think, let's focus on the reach schools, but that's why they're reach schools. And there shouldn't be many of those schools. They're aspirational in an extent, but spend some questioning about what is it about the reach school that you like, and then find that in a target school and do some solid work there. In terms of what this means, it means understanding who you are on multiple levels as an academic, and then also where you're looking to provide who you are to a college campus. And I'm trying not to make this too deep in the sense of how I want you to think about this, but academics first, right? A target school is likely a school that you're maybe in the categories in one sense. Let's use the test optional scenario. Like maybe your GPA is there, but you're not sure if testing is your thing. And if it is, and you're on your way up, maybe it meets their marks, maybe it doesn't. So you're not sure where you are in that mix. Another version of a target school would be a school where you're academically there, like your GPA is there. Maybe by the time you're hitting junior year or that solid year, you can see how you're getting into the ranges, but maybe at the bottom end of the middle 50%. You still have momentum, as Kevin was telling you, still have time, right? So maybe over that junior year into senior year, you see where that rises. Especially by the end of junior year, you have a better sense of what that GPA is. If you're at the bottom end of a middle 50% range, that's definitely a school that's a target school. You're kind of close, but a target school would be a school that might receive a lot of applications of many students who look like you. So it's kind of a toss-up. Are you admissible or not? The real reason why I'm spending time on this and why I think you should spend time on it is because these are schools that you should really spend some personal fit time thinking about. Do I like this school a lot? Is there something about this school that's making me more curious that I want to know more? And it should not be, I really hope I'm admitted to that school. That's why I want to apply to that school. That admissions part should be down the line as a thing that you're focused on. It should be more about, wow, that's a school I can see myself spending time on. That I spend so much time on their website, I can envision myself at that school, because you're likely going to be showing up to those interviews that are maybe optional or even just informational, and you're learning more about the school and yourself in this experience. That's going to help you a lot with those schools right in the middle that you're probably really hoping to be at. But it should be much more focused on your academics. Are you there or getting closer? And then also, are you prepared? Is that the type of school that you want to have a deeper conversation with when you have the opportunity to?
Great. Thank you, Craig.
All right, the questions are coming in and they're great. So the next one up is, does it look better if you challenge yourself and take many APs in junior year or not and have a higher overall GPA?
You probably get that in every panel you guys are on, so you're well versed in this.
All right, well, I'll start since no one else is jumping in. I think it's very important to try to challenge yourself, take APs, but you do not have to have more APs than you can handle. You know, we want students that can do AP courses and do well in them. But if you find that you're having a difficult time, it's better not to be, don't overload yourself. You know, do what you are comfortable doing, what you feel you can academically handle.
I just want to jump in real quick. We have a open policy for our APs, so students can take APs if it's something that they are really passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to make sure maybe in part of your explanations is, you know, not every kid can take an AP, but they also have an opportunity to gain admission to universities. So I don't want students to think, oh, I have to have APs. Can you kind of include a little bit of both? Like, you know, APs would be great, but, you know, high scores and other, like, what does that look like if there aren't any? Like, what about a school that doesn't offer APs? Like, how do you evaluate them? Just a couple, maybe include that in your responses too. Go ahead, Erica.
Well, I think it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Kevin mentioned there's no secret sauce, and there really isn't. One of the things with AP courses is you run the risk of overloading yourself, as Lori was describing. We want to make sure that you're making smart choices, because when you're on our campuses making those decisions, we want to make sure that you can handle them independently as well, right? And that you're prepared, that you're adequately preparing yourself. So it's all about having balance. I mentioned earlier, we're looking for students that are academically curious, and there are different ways that you can express that curiosity. One of them is taking perhaps some advanced courses. Everything, by the way, is within the context of your school and what's available within your school and within your community. The other could be possibly finding other things that you're interested in that you've started exploring independently, independent work that you've been doing, or other interests that you've started dabbling into. Some students do dual enrollment courses. All of those things can actually be expressions of a student challenging themselves and also expressing that academic curiosity. And it's going to vary. There is no one size fits all for every institution, but also for every student, even for every student within the same community. Like, there will not be one perfect, this is how it works for all the students at Rhinebeck. Quite the opposite, because everybody's a little different. Everybody has different characteristics and qualities that would be wonderful on our campuses. It's going to be definitely having a balance. Taking a lot more and having a low GPA speaks to perhaps not really being ready, not being prepared, and not making the best academic decision, which would concern us when you arrive on our campuses. Are you wholeheartedly ready to take on the independent work that you'll be doing and also the challenge?
Great. Just real quick, Miss Mankey, I know you're biting at you got good questions coming.
I'm ready.
This is a yes or no question, so we can all answer it. Does more than one student from our high school applying to your college limit other students' chances for acceptance?
No.
Okay, thank you. I knew that was going to be the answer, so just want to throw that in there. Miss Mankey, back to you.
Back to me. Okay, so it's extends a little bit from the previous question. So when evaluating applicants, do admissions officers focus more on APs or extracurriculars? And then does it depend on the student?
Craig?
So this gets back into a little bit more about that target discussion. And I think it's good for students to ask that type of question, or families, to those schools that are in your target range about what are they really dialing in on throughout the admissions part. And the reason I say that is most schools are going to have an academic focus to their first part of the review, but some schools will honestly talk a little bit deeper about some institutional priorities and talent or different arrangements that they're looking to bring to their school. So it's not that they don't focus on the APs or the other things you're doing, but they might also focus almost equally to some extent on some of the other things that you're doing. Where I'm going to steer this though quickly is the AP part is like a proxy for academic preparedness. Doesn't mean you max out on APs and you're more academically prepared. You were just more ready for that scenario. But the key part is you always should be focusing on your academic preparedness, because ultimately that is what is going to be the crux of a lot of admissions offices' decisions, because they want to have good faith. Not that you're going to get extra involved in college. They want that to be the case, but they really want to make sure that you academically stay at that college in the long run. So it shouldn't be that you're picking one over the other on what to focus more on. It should always be academics as the base. And if you're ready for those higher levels of challenge in APs, and fortunately you're at a district that, at a high school that will give you an academic weighted GPA because of getting into higher levels of challenge, yes, then keep moving forward there and still do those things outside the classroom. But if you notice your academics are going on the downhill slide, that doesn't mean let me double down and do more things outside the classroom to cover up for it, or extracurriculars. It means no, double back down on your academic work, build that up before you start focus on the outside the classroom thing. But real quick, back to the target piece. If the schools that you're looking at have this strong academic focus, that's where you want to make sure you're dialing in on it. If they are telling you more about the other things that they offer and what they look for in students, yeah, it's okay to try to balance out your academics with those other things you're passionate about if you have the opportunity to do so.
And juniors, you heard that in your college and career prep class. We kind of ranked what colleges we're looking at. And if you remember, the number one thing was the courses that you're selecting and how well you're doing in those courses. And those extracurriculars, those were down at like number 7 or 8 sometimes with what colleges are looking at. And you can see some head nods there that's I'm going to support what Craig just said. Thank you for saying that, because we know that at least we're teaching the right thing.
Can I say one thing about extracurriculars, though, since that came into the conversation?
Sure.
A lot of students ask, does it look good if I have a lot of extracurricular activities on my resume or in my application? And I just really want to encourage students to find things that they really love to do and really get engaged in those things, and don't feel that you have to do a million different things, because it does not necessarily look better that you're doing 10 things instead of doing 2 or 3 things really well and you're really involved. And we all look for students that are going to get engaged in leadership on campus and different types of clubs and activities. And that's much more important than how many of these things you're doing.
Thanks,
you.
Lori. Okay, Miss Mankey.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. Is it good to apply early decision or early action to a school if I really want to go?
Go ahead, Kevin.
I can start on this one, I suppose, because there's a little distinction that I like to make when it comes to applying early. Um, First of all, you should really only apply early decision, which is a binding agreement, if you really know that's the number one school that hands down you would attend if you got in. So early decision, you should think about that from that perspective rather than the statistical likelihood of being admitted, because that's really pegging you into being committed to that school. Now, there are many schools that, and Sarah Lawrence is one of them, where the admit rate is a little bit higher early decision than early action. And then the early action admit rate is a little higher than regular decision. So if you look at the percentage of students that we admit in each of those rounds, it's a little bit higher in ED than EA, and then EA is a little higher than our regular round. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier to get in. A lot of it has to do with the application volumes. A lot of it has to do with the kinds of students who are there's a lot of reasons that we get a higher admit rate for regular. The single biggest reason is we just have more applications in that round, but the profile of student that we're looking for doesn't change between early decision, early action, and regular decision. I would say that it's a question that you should start to think about now, particularly as you think about that trajectory or that junior year, transcript, because you might say when an early action deadline comes in that you're ready to go, you're happy with how your profile looks, how your transcript looks, and you're really excited about schools that have early action deadlines. So there's no reason for you not to. There's not a commitment deadline as the way there is with early decision, and you'll get an earlier admission decision. But there may be cases where if you applied early action, if you're doing well in your classes and you want the colleges to see your first semester senior year grades, for example, you might actually have a better likelihood of being admitted in regular decision than early action after you have a few more grades to showcase the strength that you're at now. So I think it's a conversation, and it's some thoughtfulness that goes into it. But I would say don't equate higher statistical likelihood of being admitted in earlier rounds with being quote unquote easier to get in. We're still looking for a very similar profile. And I'm saying that partially to say, if you apply regular decision, don't worry. That's still where most of our students come in to our actual enrolling populations, at least at Sarah Lawrence. So there's pay attention. There's nuance to those rounds. And that's a little bit of how I've seen that nuance play out from the Sarah Lawrence perspective.
And that's going to be different across all schools. Some schools do admit higher in ED, do admit more students, and some do not in other students. Erica, I'll let you just jump in there. We have about 7 more questions, and we have about 15 more minutes. So Erica, if you had one more comment on that, go for it, and then we'll bring Ms. Mankey back.
You actually made it. The nuance point is also how you ask the question, right? Depending on the institution, the volume of the size of the incoming class that's coming through ED is going to vary significantly. At Rochester is very similar to Sarah Lawrence. It's only about maybe a third of our incoming class, but at other institutions, it could be as high as half or even more. And so that's where it's important to have the conversation with the admissions office. You are generally competing with a smaller population of students because that group of applicants is a little bit smaller. And that's why the percentage can seem deceptively higher. But to double check what the distinctions are from one school to the other will be important.
Thank you.
So the next question is, are you offering campus visits or is it all virtual? So maybe we can just go around and say if you're doing one or the other or both.
Okay, I'll start. At the moment, we're only doing virtual. A lot of virtual services and a virtual tour. Again, we are hoping that come spring, a little later on, when things come down a little, that we will start offering in-person tours again.
Craig?
They're both scenarios right now. Just the in-person ones are a little competitive. They're smaller, so they're competitive to get. So be patient. If you have plenty of time as we get into the spring. if you want an in-person.
Kevin?
We are doing virtual from now until whenever. And then our in-person visits are going to start hopefully February, but outside only, no inside spaces. And again, tour size is capped so that we can maintain distances and manageable groups.
Erica?
Same as Sarah Lawrence, we're doing virtual right now. Everything was shifted onto a virtual in the last few weeks, and we hope to be back in person soon. It all depends on the evolution of the pandemic. A quick note on this is also, as you're researching institutions, please be mindful that we are at the mercy of whatever's happening in our county, in our state. And so it's important that you do research in advance of any visit. An appointment with an institution could change from one day to the next or from 1 week to the next. So a lot of flexibility and patience will be involved in planning your visits. And we thank you in advance for all of that.
Okay. Is it good? Should you focus on a major you see fit for yourself or focus on a school? Which one has a higher precedence?
Okay,
I
I'm
want
going
to
to jump.
answer that one.
Okay, you go first, Susan. Then
No,
I'll
no,
go.
no. Go ahead. No, I say I want to, but I'm not going to. Lori, go ahead.
Okay. We find that students change their majors many times. So you do not have to be pressured if you do not know what you want to major in. If you think you know what you want to major in, still keep an open mind, be prepared to potentially change your major. And curriculum at schools, including ours, is really laid out so that you take a lot of general ed, liberal arts, humanities, a whole array of courses when you first enter, giving you an opportunity to explore. And you have really until your junior year or just before your junior year to decide what you want to major in.
Okay.
I absolutely agree with that. I just want to take a slightly different angle, meaning you should focus on the school experience that you're looking for. That's going to help you figure out how you want to make an impact in the world. And then within that, you're going to pick the area of study that you want to be. And you might already know, but you might pick that new thing. You should pick the school that you really like, but be careful, right? To not just focus on the school and exclude those other things that you want, meaning this gets back into the trap of like, well, let me just focus on that school I want to be admitted to, and hopefully they have what I want to study. You should still find that synergy that you can find your academic path there. So do both, but don't get too caught up in the school's name or the experience of, oh, that's the school I want to tell people I was admitted to.
Another one, Ms.
Okay.
Becky?
Yes. So next up, does speaking more than one language fluently increase your chances of getting in?
Yes or no? Got 3 no's. Kevin?
No.
Okay, that was an easier one. You got another one?
I do. Yes. So a lot of the admission seems to be about telling the college who the applicant is. What tips or ideas do you have for that person to be able to describe themselves, as sometimes it is difficult to put into words, or to choose what about them they should include and how?
Ooh, stump the panel.
I'll start, and I think I can be quick because this is a tip that I try to give fairly frequently.
Nice.
I recommend you find a small number, 1, 2, or 3 people to sort of review your essay and your writing, but people that you trust, and people that you trust not to edit your voice out of it either. In other words, somebody who's going to, be able to give an honest assessment back to you and say, yeah, I really see you in that. And I can, and this is an appropriate way for you to showcase who you are. That might be a parent, a counselor. I would err on the side of somebody who's a little more experienced than a classmate. But you'll find feedback from lots of sources. But I would say stay true to yourself in that, and find that feedback that's gonna help bring you out of it, rather than edit your own voice out of it. Trust yourself, and ask for impressions of appropriateness and how well you're coming through. Is kind of the way that I phrase it sometimes.
Go ahead, Erica.
Sometimes this question sort of tags on to, I want to say what admissions counselors want to hear. And that's often what stumps a student with, for example, essays or other elements of the application, because you really are eager to make that impression. And we want to get to know you. We want to hear your voice. We don't go to your school. We don't live in your communities. We don't walk a day in your shoes. And sometimes the things that students disqualify as being not interesting or not particularly important turn out to actually be the opposite, entirely important to the application, because they give us an understanding of who you are and a better sense of why our institution, our communities might be actually a great fit. So I would kind of turn this question back and ask the students, what about you would you want us to know? If you were to make a list right now, what are the top 3 or 4 things that you think are interesting, or maybe you don't think they're interesting, but perhaps someone in your life is like, you do this every day. The things that you do every day can actually be pretty unique and something that we want to know more about. So it shouldn't require as much thought, though I know it's easy to say and harder to do. But it's the first things that come to your mind. And to the point that Kevin was making with the essays, if you're rereading your essay and you're sharing it with somebody else, ask them what their takeaway is. And is what they're telling you actually what you were hoping they would take away from reading that essay? If it's not, then you probably have to go back to the drawing board. But it's actually a little simpler than perhaps we make it very, very complicated, because I know the process can be very complicated. But just start reflecting on the things that are part of your everyday life that you do all the time, that you love to do, or that perhaps are characteristics of you that others are always pointing out to you, and see how those might translate to an application.
Great, thank you.
Can I quickly just
Right,
add?
right, go ahead.
Yes.
We talked a little bit in the beginning about these virtual opportunities to meet with colleges as you grow through your junior year. Use that not for admissions purposes again, but use that for your own self-discovery. When you're talking to people like us one-on-one, when we're asking you questions about something that you're telling us, then you might realize, wait a second, that college seems interested in that, and that's what I'm interested in. This might give you some good food for thought over the summer to write that essay on. So just experiment it. Just put yourself out there. You're going to learn the more you talk about these things with colleges, you're going to figure out more about yourself in this too. And that will help resonate around those things you want to tell us about in writing.
Thanks, Greg. Just real quick, juniors, you may know this, but junior parents, you will be working on your college essay as part of your curriculum in your English classes during the 3rd or 4th quarter, depending on which English class you're on. And it will be a graded assignment. So it's going to get graded, edited, and you'll have a chance to resubmit, and you may use that. You may change your mind over the summer. You may do something completely different in the fall, or you may be just tweaking that come the fall.
Okay, next up, curious about how long each application gets at admissions. The college admissions counselor mentioned a holistic approach, but what is the real time per application?
Go.
I'm happy to start this because I've worked at different institutions, and I can honestly tell you it varies so dramatically from one school to the other. At other schools where I've worked, after a while of reading applications, you learn a little bit of a shorthand to be able to capture as much information as possible that you need. And it would take me maybe 10, 15 minutes to go over it. Everywhere I've worked, there's multiple readers. So usually the first person that reads your application is the boots on the ground that has a better understanding of the school, the community, and can provide some of that context. And then there's a second reader, and then depending on the school, even more. Now that I'm at Rochester, we have admissions committees. So I'm one of the readers, then there's a second reader. It takes me, by the way, about anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour sometimes to read an application, because it's a very involved process sometimes for us. And then depending on the application, there might be a second committee if you're applying to a specialized program. So there are multiple eyes reading an application. You dedicate a ton of time to your applications, and we value it. We want to make sure we're taking away as much information as possible. And thank you for the amount of time that you'll be dedicating to those also, by the way. I'm a slow reader. I should probably put that out there, by the way. Not everybody in the office takes as long as I do. So.
Is anybody very different? Because we do have 6 more questions that we're going to try to squeeze in the next 5 minutes. Okay, Ms. Menke?
Okay, next up, does it help for admission to apply undeclared, or some majors harder to get into than others?
I think that really just depends on the school and the programs. I think if you're looking at engineering programs or pre-med programs at certain institutions, they may have much different quotas or, sort of allowances for incoming students. Other schools may not, have as much of that. So it's going to depend school to school. So you're going to want to actually sort of do the research. And that's a great question to ask in these virtual information sessions that you have access to in the virtual Zoom world now.
That's great advice. You keep hearing the word juniors research. Okay, so just keep listening to that part.
Can I just piggyback on that for 1 minute?
Yeah.
I think it's also important to ask, and engineering is a great example. Sometimes students think if they apply through a liberal arts program or is undecided, that they'll get in and then they can switch into engineering. And that is often not the case. So just be aware of that and ask the schools. So don't go in thinking that you can necessarily make that switch into a particular school, because that's not always possible.
Nice. Okay.
Okay, what do I need to get a merit-based scholarship, and how likely is it?
It depends, right?
It's going to vary by school. Again, it's one of those questions that there is no specific answer. Every school is going to have a different requirement and expectations, and then also the way that those scholarships are renewed from one year to the next will also vary from school to school. So just the best you can do is keep working hard and put the best of yourself out there with your application.
Would you think that, sorry, Lori, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and find out if there's a separate application for getting a merit-based scholarship, because sometimes there is, and it's a whole separate process and essay. And sometimes students are just picked from the regular applicant pool. So
would it be safe to say that a likely school would be more apt to offer merit money versus a reach school? Okay.
Yes.
So that goes back to Craig and your list, and keeping that in mind.
Okay, next up. So appearing and doing well in an AP exam with self-study, but not being enrolled in the AP class, will this help in seeking admission?
I want to just say that if the AP part, again, is not necessarily about the admissions part, it's about being ready for college. So on both fronts, those are helpful things. That's what if you're ready for that and you have the ability to do that and you're eager to do that and curious to do it, then do it for the preparation for the next level. But we will notice that, and those are things that you can talk about too, and it's a good thing, but don't look at it as a one or the other, better or not, and for admissions. This is more so about you preparing as a high school student.
I also want to point out that at many schools, if you've taken an AP test and gotten a particular score, if you score high, you can get college credit for that. So it can ultimately save you money. So that is just something to keep in mind as well.
Okay, I think we have time maybe for 2 more questions, Ms. Maggie.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to get going. I've heard that many colleges have been using adjunct professors for remote learning, and often they are not located near the university. Are you seeing this practice at your schools, or have you heard of this happening at other schools? Thank you.
I was just trying to, I have not seen that happening, but I will go back not that long ago. Some of my favorite professors were the adjuncts. And they didn't teach it remotely, but they were not there. They weren't at Binghamton. They came to Binghamton to teach. But I haven't seen that phenomenon happening. I just wouldn't put that as a concern, though, if that did happen, because there's some interesting adjuncts to provide some real context.
Got another one, Miss Maggie?
I do. Does quality of the writing in personal essays matter?
Good question. Lots of yeses.
Yes, it does. I mean, think of the essay as your few minutes alone with us. What do you want to? What kind of impression do you want to leave on the person that's reading the application? If there's poor writing and a lot of grammatical errors, you might be a straight A student. We would have significant concerns about the quality of the work that you might be able to handle as a new student. At Rochester, we definitely weigh writing heavily for all of our first year students. At some schools, your essay might be used even for placement. So important to pay attention to it. By the way, also with the supplements. So we're talking a lot about the college essay, but we haven't mentioned supplemental essays. Sometimes the most honest writing happens in those supplements because you're taking less time to work on them. And so this is my 2 seconds to tell you to please prepare, plan, and reread those as well, because they too will be important parts of the process.
Okay, last question, and then what's up next? We have 2 minutes total
Okay.
for those two things to happen. Go.
So last question, how can we get help for getting a scholarship? And this might be more for us too, Ms. Hannon, of how the office can assist with that. But on the college level, any guidance?
I know that our financial aid website does have a section for external sources that we have found students successfully receiving or working with agencies. And so we can't really be a direct connection to a lot of those, but as we find those opportunities, we'll put them on ours. And I know other colleges do as well, but I think you're going to be well served to connect with your counselors on that question.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank our panelists and all the parents and students who sent in those great questions. I had like 30 questions and I only got to ask 2, which means hopefully what I said in the beginning, that I hope that you are leaving here today, parents and students, with more answers than questions. Panelists, you're always so great with our students and with us, and you're so knowledgeable in your field. You are the experts on the other side of the desk, and we so appreciate everything that you had to offer tonight. And if we have any additional questions that come in, I will personally send those to you, get the answers, and then we can provide that out to our parents. So thank you so much for joining us. For the juniors, stay on for a second. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what's next. Okay. So thank you, you guys. You're welcome to sign off.
Great night, everyone.
Okay, so super quick. The next thing that's coming up is course selection. I said, juniors, you will be picking your courses on February 1st. And then we're asking all students and parents or guardians to please schedule what we call a junior meeting, where we will discuss your post-high school planning. And that's for students attending college and not attending college. So if your friends are not attending college or not sure and weren't at this meeting, please let them know. We'll let them know as well. Those meetings will be starting the week of February 7th. And you make those meetings by calling Mrs. Williams. You can start tomorrow to schedule those appointments. The number is there. We do also have evening hours for those of you who are unable to make it to our meeting. These meetings will be virtual or in person. That's up to you, but no more than 2 parents or guardians with the student. We just don't have enough room for social distancing. And those evening hours come first serve. We each have 3 dates that we do those. After that, start preparing and registering for those tests. If you do plan on submitting tests, or at least taking the test to see if you'll submit. And juniors, you already have a starter list that you've done in the college and career prep class. So now it's back to that keyword I was talking about with research. And then get out there, do those visits. You heard some are, most are virtual now, but hopefully you'll get some in-person visits. And as always, use our Google Classroom and Naviance as resources. So I know I kind of flew through that really quickly, but I wanted to make sure that you had our next steps because those are most important. So thank you and good night from our school counseling staff. Mr. Miller is in another meeting. So on behalf of him, I'll say goodbye from him. Ms. Menke?
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the wonderful questions. And I just want to add, we are here for you. We love this part of the job and the process, and we're here to help. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to reach out. And thanks so much again for joining us.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Evan Miller, one of the school counselors, joined here by Miss Nadia Whiting and Richard Alvarez. Miss Whiting.
Buenas tardes, este es el señor Miller, es el consejero de RINEC y tenemos aquí con nosotros a Richard Alvarez, quien será el presentador esta noche. Si tienen cualquier pregunta, me lo pueden mandar al correo electrónico y el señor Richard Alvarez nos lo contestará en persona.
Great. So if there are any questions, they can email you. So Miss Whiting, please let them know your email address.
El correo electrónico es nwhi de Italia, t i de Italia, n de nataliag@rhinec.org.
Great. Thank you very much. Now we can introduce Richard Alvarez and let him take it away.
Ok, muy buenas noches todo el mundo. Espero que todo el mundo esté saludable y que la familia, todo el mundo esté bien. Feliz año nuevo. Quiero darle muchas gracias a la facultad y los administradores de Rhinec High School que han puesto este programa para ustedes. Y pues desafortunadamente con las condiciones de la pandemia estamos en un mundo virtual otra vez, pero esperamos que esta presentación le podamos dar información básica de cómo usted puede ayudar a su hijo o hija a ingresar a la universidad. Primero quiero dar un poquito de introducción. Mi nombre es Richard Álvarez. Estoy recientemente retirado después de 36 años trabajando en el sistema universitario en Nueva York. Y gracias otra vez por sus atenciones esta noche. El propósito de esta conferencia es para darle información de cómo sus niños pueden ingresar a la universidad en los Estados Unidos. Me imagino que la mayor parte de los niños están en el grado 10 o el grado 11, pero y la información que vamos a dar hoy asume que el estudiante está en el grado 11, pero es bueno empezar temprano si tiene niños más pequeños, o si el estudiante ya está en el grado 12, creo que va a haber alguna información que pueda utilizar. Lo primero que quiero compartir es que en los Estados Unidos, cada estudiante que se gradúa de escuela secundaria puede ingresar a la universidad. Y quiero pues enfatizar eso porque en muchos países latinoamericanos no es posible que todos los estudiantes puedan ingresar a la universidad. En los Estados Unidos sí es posible. Así que por favor, no importa el tipo de calificaciones que el estudiante tiene, el estatus migratorio de inmigración no tiene nada que ver con ingresar a la universidad, así que todos los estudiantes que terminan la escuela secundaria pueden ingresar a la universidad en los Estados Unidos. El segundo punto que quiero compartir es la filosofía educativa a nivel universitario en los Estados Unidos. Nosotros, por la mayoría de las instituciones, tienen la filosofía de las artes liberales. Eso quiere decir que el estudiante puede ingresar a un recinto universitario sin tener que definir qué carrera quiere seguir. Esto es muy distinto, otra vez, a lo que sucede fuera de los Estados Unidos, donde la mayor parte de los estudiantes tienen que saber qué carrera quieren seguir para entonces empezar sus estudios. En los Estados Unidos no es así, así que si su hijo o hija no sabe qué quiere estudiar, no importa, porque parte del sistema educativo universitario en los Estados Unidos es para ayudar al estudiante a poder desarrollar sus intereses, exponerlo a muchas áreas distintas para que puedan entonces escoger qué carrera universitaria quieren seguir. Así que esos son dos puntos que quiero que, si no se acuerdan de nada más de esta noche, recuerden, todos los estudiantes pueden ingresar al sistema universitario y no importa qué quieren estudiar o si no saben qué quieren estudiar, pueden ingresar a la universidad. Nosotros en Nueva York tenemos mucha suerte que hay una cantidad bastante amplia de opciones para los estudiantes. En el estado de Nueva York tenemos en sí dos sistemas universitarios. Está el sistema universitario privado, y por ejemplo en Westchester está Pace University, está Iona, que son ejemplos de colegios, universidades privadas. Y tenemos dos sistemas públicos que reciben subsidios del gobierno del estado de Nueva York. El primero es CUNY, donde yo estudié y de donde me retiré. Es el sistema universitario de la ciudad de Nueva York. Tiene 25 recintos en los 5 condados de Nueva York. Ejemplos de sus colegios es Lehman College en el Bronx, está City College, Hunter College, Baruch, y el cual yo me retiré, Queens College, que son todos colegios universitarios públicos que están afiliados con la ciudad de Nueva York. pero están abiertos para todos los estudiantes del estado. El segundo sistema universitario en el estado de Nueva York es el de SUNY, la Universidad del Estado de Nueva York, y tienen 64 recintos en el estado completo. En el condado de Westchester tenemos a SUNY Purchase, tenemos a Westchester Community College como ejemplos de los recintos que existen. Lo otro que quiero hablar de tipos de universidades, antes de sí empezar con la presentación, es que tenemos varios tipos de colegios e universidades. Está el sistema secundario, RINEC being uno de ellos, donde el estudiante al final de sus estudios consigue el título de High School Diploma. Tenemos entonces colegios comunitarios, que son colegios que otorgan el grado asociado, que son los primeros 2 años estudios universitarios. Como mencioné, Westchester Community College, Rockland son ejemplos de los colegios comunitarios. Luego tenemos los colegios de 4 años o universidades que otorgan el título de bachillerato. En los Estados Unidos, el diploma universitario lo llamamos el bachillerato. Sabemos que en la mayoría de los países latinoamericanos, el bachillerato es el título de secundaria. En los Estados Unidos, el bachillerato es el título de 4 años universitarios. El próximo nivel de educativo aquí es entonces la maestría y está el doctorado, que son, por ejemplo, los próximos pasos. Para, por ejemplo, ser maestro, el estudiante necesita tener un bachillerato, que es el título universitario de 4 años, y una maestría, que son 2 años después del título universitario. Así que eso es para darle la base del sistema educativo. Ahora vamos a hablar un poquito de cómo empezamos ese proceso. Lo otro que es bastante único en los Estados Unidos, y RINEC es exemplar es la cantidad de profesionales que existen en la escuela para ayudar a cada estudiante y cada familia a ingresar a la universidad. Así que, por favor, cerciórense que sus hijos y usted también tenga la oportunidad de hablar con consejeros y conseguir toda la información. No hay razón por la cual cualquier pregunta que usted tenga no se la puedan responder en la escuela. Evan, you could go to the next slide. Bueno, como mencioné anteriormente, en los Estados Unidos, todos los estudiantes que terminan escuela secundaria tienen la oportunidad de ingresar a una universidad o un colegio. Así que tenemos que hacer un poquito de trabajo, y ahora empezando en el grado 11 es cuando en sí empieza el proceso de estudiantes poder evaluar qué tipo de universidad quieren ingresar cuando se gradúen de la escuela secundaria. Y decimos pues que cada estudiante tiene la oportunidad de decidir qué tipo de recinto, de qué tipo de universidad, colegio quiere ingresar. No es el que diga el vecino, no es el que esté en la prensa, no es el que alguien o un compañero de escuela vaya a hacer, sino que cada estudiante tiene que averiguar qué tipo de recinto quieren estudiar cuando terminen su secundaria. Next. O sea, en los Estados Unidos, como mencioné, tenemos una variedad bastante amplia de recintos universitarios, y queremos que el estudiante pues pueda encontrar y por el dice, aquí se me traba un poquito el research que tiene que hacer el estudiante para ver cuál es el recinto que es mejor para él o para ella. Next. Y parte de ese proceso es el estudiante tratar de ver quién es, qué le gusta, qué quiere estudiar, si sabe, está envuelto en la escuela ahora, o si no está envuelto, quisiera estar envuelto en actividades a nivel universitario. Y pues eso es parte del proceso, y cada estudiante va a tener conferencias con su consejero en RINEC para poder, o en su escuela, en cualquier otra escuela en Westchester, para poder entonces responder a esas preguntas y empezar entonces a a crear una lista para investigar qué ofrecen en la escuela, dónde está localizada y conseguir más información. Next. Nosotros tenemos la fortuna de que en los Estados Unidos tenemos más de 3.300 colegios universidades, o sea que las opciones que existen para cada estudiante son muy, muy buenas. Y como le dije anteriormente, cada estudiante que termina la escuela secundaria tiene la oportunidad de ingresar a un colegio universitario. Y el proceso, pues, toma tiempo, hay que buscar información y queremos que los estudiantes tengan la oportunidad de hablar con sus consejeros, conseguir información, consultar con usted. Usted puede consultar con el consejero para ver cómo llegamos a una lista para el estudiante empezar a llenar solicitudes. Generalmente estudiantes solicitan de 6 a 10 colegios universitarios y vamos a hablar un poquito de la selección, pero quería pues darle un overview del proceso. Next. Parte del proceso de evaluación del estudiante, pero también de la familia, es pues se quiere quedar en casa, quiere irse lejos. Yo, por ejemplo, y sabemos que en la familia latina el concepto de una persona irse a estudiar, pues no, usualmente se quedan en casa porque mami quiere que duerma y esté protegido, pero sí tenemos muchas opciones. Yo personalmente crecí en Puerto Rico, hice mis estudios de secundaria en Puerto Rico, quería estudiar en los Estados Unidos y vine a estudiar a la ciudad de Nueva York. Así que es posible de hospedarse, tener muchas opciones y eso es algo que el estudiante y la familia pues tienen que decidir qué opciones hay. También hay tamaños bastante distintos de cada organización, de cada institución. Yo, por ejemplo, fui a un recinto donde habían 20,000 estudiantes. Salí de una escuela pequeñita donde la clase graduanda era de 146 estudiantes. Ingresé a un recinto de 20,000 estudiantes que fue un shock, pero era la mejor opción para mí. También, pues, estudiantes a lo mejor quieren estar en un recinto pequeño, un recinto mediano, quieren ver, para niñas hay colegios que son solamente de niñas, o sea que hay bastantes opciones y ese es el proceso que el estudiante junto a usted va a repasar y a evaluar durante los próximos 6-8 meses. Next. Y como mencioné anteriormente, no es preciso o necesario saber exactamente qué va a estudiar, pero tiene que tener en mente cuáles son sus intereses, qué tipo si tiene 3 o 4 ideas de carrera, si las pueden hacer en el mismo recinto. Yo, por ejemplo, cuando estaba en escuela secundaria, mi mamá era higiene dental y yo pues crecí en una oficina dental y yo pensé que iba a ser dentista. No surgió así. Ingresé a la universidad, descubrí ciencias políticas, descubrí comunicación y esos fueron ahí fue que decidí que escuela de dental no era la opción y tuve mi carrera completa en un recinto universitario. Y recuerden que no es necesario que el estudiante sepa qué quiere estudiar para poder ingresar a un colegio universitario en los Estados Unidos. Next. Bueno, y quiero recordarle que si tiene alguna pregunta, por favor, le envíen al correo electrónico que se le dio anteriormente y espero poder responder a todas sus preguntas. Voy a repasar un poquito antes de entrar al proceso de admisión. Durante el grado 11, lo que queda del grado 11, es importante que el estudiante tenga una conferencia con su consejero y usualmente tiene una conferencia con los padres también. Una de las cosas que hemos aprendido de la pandemia es que sí podemos hacer muchas cosas virtuales, y es posible utilizar tecnología para poder darle la facilidad a usted como padre si está trabajando para poder tener una conferencia con el consejero de su hijo o de su hija, y no es necesariamente entonces tener que venir en persona, y pues eso es algo que creo que deben de hacer, que es muy importante. Durante este periodo ahora a finales o la segunda mitad del año 11, es importante que el estudiante termine y tenga las calificaciones mejores. El proceso que queremos es que el estudiante empiece a pensar dónde quiere estudiar, qué tipo como habíamos dicho en la presentación anterior, dónde quiere estudiar, qué quiere hacer, si puede irse lejos de casa, quiere estar cerca. Y pues esa es información que es importante. A finales de este año hay dos cosas que les recomiendo que el estudiante tenga. Una sería una lista de al menos 10 o 15 colegios o universidades que quieren hacer más investigaciones, y lo pueden hacer todo en línea. Segundo, deben de tener una lista de 2 o 3 maestros que a ellos le van a preguntar, que puedan escribir una carta de recomendación para el estudiante. Y vamos a hablar un poquito más de eso en detalle. O sea que esas son las dos cosas que son muy importantes que lo hagan entre ahora y al finales de mayo, cuando termine el año escolar. Durante el verano, parte del proceso del estudiante y de usted, si tienen la oportunidad y si esta pandemia nos deja regresar a la vida normal, es a empezar a visitar recintos si pueden, específicamente si son en Nueva York. Y pues voy ahora a hablar un poquito de cómo se hacen decisiones de admisiones y qué información necesita el estudiante para poder llenar la solicitud para ingresar, y cómo esas decisiones se van a hacer. Lo más importante en el récord académico en una solicitud para la universidad es el récord académico. Queremos ver lo que el estudiante ha hecho en el grado 9, grado 10, ahora en el grado 11, y qué cursos van a tomar en el grado 12. Porque la mayor parte de los recintos universitarios van a estar utilizando esa información muy importante. Así que todavía hay tiempo para cerrar este año escolar, como decimos en Puerto Rico, con broche de oro, que el estudiante pues pueda tener las mejores calificaciones posibles, porque mientras mejores calificaciones tenga, muchas más opciones tienen para ingresar a un colegio universitario. Perdón. Y aquí pues tienen la lista, tenemos entonces el SAT, que son los exámenes, o ACT, los exámenes nacionales. Vamos a hablar un poquito más de eso en breve. Cartas de recomendación, como le mencioné, el ensayo, y si hay alguna información en cuanto a actividades que el estudiante esté envuelto, o si está trabajando, o si tiene otras, que eso es parte de la solicitud del estudiante. Next. Vamos a hablar entonces del récord académico. Como mencioné, es el punto más importante de cualquier solicitud. Vemos qué cursos ha tomado el estudiante desde el grado 9 al grado 12, qué calificaciones ha obtenido, y queremos ver que el estudiante haya tenido, ¿cómo se dice? Mejor calificaciones de cada año. Sabemos que el noveno grado usualmente es el grado más difícil, porque el estudiante está haciendo una transición del octavo grado al noveno grado, y la mayor parte del tiempo están ingresando a una escuela nueva, que pues es obvio que ese es el año donde el estudiante pues pueda tener más dificultad, pero queremos ver que su récord académico vaya mejorando todos los años. También queremos ver que el estudiante haya obtenido o haya tomado los cursos más avanzados que pueda en su escuela, ya sea Advanced Placement, ya sea cursos de honores. No es un requisito, porque el currículo normal del estado es muy bueno, pero son cosas que muchos recintos universitarios específicamente los que son bastante selectivos, van a estar viendo en la transmisión de crédito del estudiante. Quiero acordarle que algo muy importante, la mayor parte de nosotros, y específicamente ahora durante la pandemia, estamos utilizando todo y estamos haciendo todo electrónicamente. Así que es muy importante que el estudiante utilice el nombre legal que tiene en los récords académicos de la escuela secundaria, que lo utilice para cuando está llenando solicitudes para admisión, cuando está llenando solicitudes de ayuda financiera, cuando está escribiéndole a colegios universitarios para recibir más información, porque si tienen distintos nombres se hace muy difícil para poder poner todo junto cuando el estudiante lleve o someta su solicitud para la universidad. Así que es muy importante en repaso del récord académico que el estudiante pues obtenga las mejores calificaciones posibles, que cierre este año con las mejores notas que pueda, porque eso sí pues va a ser un factor en el tipo de colegio o universidad que el estudiante puede ingresar cuando se gradúe de RINEC. Next. Hablamos un poquito de Standardized Test y en los Estados Unidos se usa, en los Estados Unidos no tenemos un currículo a nivel de secundaria en el país. O sea, cada estado tiene su currículo de estado. Así que muchos colegios, universidades utilizan lo que llamamos el Standardized Test, que usamos el SAT o el ACT para ayudar a cada recinto universitario a evaluar una solicitud y ver cómo está ese estudiante. Por la pandemia, hay muchos colegios y universidades que han puesto una pausa en el requisito de los exámenes nacionales, que como mencioné es el SAT o ACT. Y los consejeros pues le pueden dar un poquito más de información, pero porque los recintos no están utilizando estos exámenes, es mucho más importante que el récord académico que hablamos anteriormente sea lo más fuerte que pueda, que el estudiante tenga las mejores calificaciones que pueda y que haya obtenido los mejores resultados en sus estudios. Next. Mencioné esto que, por ejemplo, es importante que si el estudiante va a solicitar a una universidad o colegio que no ha puesto una pausa en los exámenes, que el estudiante esté bien preparado y la oficina de consejería de RINEC le puede dar mucha información en cómo se pueden preparar para estos exámenes nacionales. Next. Thank you. Hablamos del récord académico, hablamos de los exámenes nacionales. El tercer componente de una solicitud son las cartas de recomendación. Y las cartas de recomendaciones es una oportunidad para el comité de admisiones del recinto universitario de conocer al estudiante. Lo que hemos visto, por ejemplo, si estamos estudiando o repasando la solicitud de admisión, hemos visto el récord académico, que es una lista de cursos con correspondientes calificaciones. Tenemos los exámenes nacionales y este es el primer, como diría, la primera oportunidad que tenemos de conocer al estudiante. Y pues queremos que el estudiante pues le pregunte a maestros, a consejeros, si está en deporte, que le pregunte a un coach, que nos dé un poquito más de información del estudiante que no la podemos ver. O sea, que es importante que la persona que el estudiante quiera que escriba una carta de recomendaciones, tiene que ser alguien que conozca al estudiante y que nos pueda dar un poquito más de información que ya no la tenemos. Una carta de recomendación que nos diga, Richard es un estudiante excelente, está en mi clase de biología y obtuvo una calificación de A. Sí, es muy bueno, pero esa es información que nosotros como comité de admisiones ya tenemos porque eso lo podemos ver en el récord académico. O sea que es importante que el estudiante le pida a maestros que los conocen. Otra vez, la pandemia pues ha cambiado cómo nuestros estudiantes, específicamente los últimos 2 años, han podido desarrollar sus relaciones con los maestros, así que es posible que le pregunten a un maestro del 9º grado o del grado 10º si el estudiante siente o cree que ese maestro lo conoce mejor que los maestros que tuvo el año pasado o maestros que tienen este año. A pesar de que está todo el mundo en la escuela, pero es un poquito distinto con todos los requisitos de la pandemia. Next. El cuarto punto, y este para mí es muy importante, es el ensayo. Esta es la oportunidad del estudiante poder introducir su persona al comité de admisiones. Y este es uno de los puntos donde el estudiante usualmente se demora más, porque es algo que debe ser personal, es algo que debe estar bien escrito y usualmente estudiantes esperan hasta el último momento para escribir su ensayo. Les recomiendo que el estudiante empiece a pensar cómo quiere desarrollar su ensayo, y hay muchas opciones, pero es algo, como le mencioné, que es muy importante. Para mí siempre ha sido importante porque es la oportunidad. Muchos colegios, universidades no tienen la habilidad de tener entrevistas con cada estudiante, así que el ensayo es la oportunidad del estudiante poder decirnos quién es. Es importante que el estudiante pues nos dé un ejemplo. He hablado con colegas en cuanto a qué son buenos ensayos, qué son ensayos que no ayudan. Y quiero pues darle un ejemplo. Hubo un estudiante que escribió, la pregunta que estaba respondiendo era quién era una persona en la vida del estudiante que fue muy, muy importante para el estudiante. Y el estudiante escribió el ensayo de que su abuela era la persona que era muy importante en su familia. Y un ensayo perfecto, gramático, muy bien, o sea, todo. El único problema es que el comité de admisiones quería darle admisión a la abuela porque sabían tanto de la abuela, pero no sabían tanto del estudiante. O sea que es importante que el estudiante utilice el ensayo para dejarnos saber quién es él o ella. Y hay mucha ayuda para los ensayos. O sea, los consejeros pueden ayudar al estudiante a repasarlo, a cerciorarse que está, ¿cómo se dice? El requisito. O sea, déjeme explicar un punto que se me olvidó. Hay varias opciones para el ensayo. Recintos universitarios, algunos tienen preguntas específicas que quieren que el estudiante responda. Otros le dan algunas opciones y hay otros que no importa, puede ser un ensayo personal. Y dependiendo a qué tipo de recinto universitario el estudiante va a ingresar, es importante que sepa qué tipo de ensayo necesita utilizar para ese recinto. Otros, y específicamente en este tiempo ahora donde tantos colegios universitarios han puesto pausa a el requisito de los exámenes nacionales, el ensayo es muy importante para nosotros poder evaluar la solicitud del estudiante. Así que le ruego que por favor cerciórese que sus estudiantes empiecen a trabajar con un ensayo. Idealmente, el estudiante debe de tener ya su primer borrón de, como decimos en Puerto Rico, su primera draft del ensayo cuando empieza el grado 12. Esa es una asignatura que le estoy dando a ustedes para que sus estudiantes, su hijo o su hija puedan terminar su ensayo o al menos la primera copia de su ensayo antes de que empiece su grado 12. Y porque así pues pueden requerir asistencia del consejero o de un maestro de inglés que lo lea y que le ayude a desarrollar su ensayo, recordando que el ensayo tiene que ser escrito por el estudiante. Así que, pero es algo que es importante Hay colegios que no lo dan como opción. Yo siempre les recomiendo al estudiante que, si, aunque sea necesario o no, el estudiante debe de someter su ensayo porque es una oportunidad de poder introducirse al comité de admisión que va a evaluar la solicitud. Next. Y por último, queremos pues que el estudiante comparta o someta en su solicitud qué ha hecho, además de ir a la escuela y tener buenas calificaciones. Hay estudiantes que están envueltos en deporte, en organizaciones en la escuela, servicios comunitarios, o si tienen tienen trabajo, o es posible que tengan que ayudar a sus padres a cuidar a niños, si tienen un negocio. O sea que queremos que el estudiante pues, pueda compartir en su solicitud universitaria qué hace además de ir a la escuela. Y esto pues es algo importante porque le da una tercera dimensión al estudiante. Y lo otro es que pues es parte del trabajo que el estudiante va a hacer con su consejero de cómo desarrollar esa lista de actividades, o, como mencioné, si no está envuelto en nada porque está trabajando o está ayudando a la familia, cómo el estudiante puede presentar esa información. Next. So, parte del proceso que hablamos y la razón por la cual estamos teniendo este taller es para que el estudiante empiece a desarrollar esa lista de universidades al cual quizás solicite. Como mencioné anteriormente, usualmente el estudiante solicita o somete 6 a 10 solicitudes, pero para llegar a esa lista, pues tiene que empezar con una lista de colegios un poquito más. Así que esto es parte del proceso de cómo desarrollar una lista donde el estudiante entonces va a pasar más tiempo haciendo investigación de esos recintos para entonces, cuando regrese al año 12, empezar a llenar solicitudes. Next. Estas son hay distintas fechas límites y no voy a hacer esto porque sé que la escuela va a tener un taller de todos los decisions plans y cuándo tiene que llenar la solicitud, así que vamos a pasar a, no voy a hablar mucho de este tema. Next. Next. Thank you. Y pues quiero dar un poquito de información y creo que tenemos 2 o 3 más puntos y luego pues queremos responder a sus preguntas. Quiero repasar un poquito. Es importante que el estudiante pues tome la iniciativa de qué quiere estudiar, dónde quiere estudiar, cuáles son sus opciones. Es importante que utilice los recursos que hay en la escuela. Cada estudiante tiene un consejero, es una persona que está bien informado del proceso universitario, y son recursos que están disponibles para el estudiante, están disponibles para ustedes, así que por favor tomen ventaja de él. Next. Estas son formas que he hablado un poquito de ellos, cómo pueden conseguir información. Ingresar a la página de cada recinto, buscar la información, escribir a la oficina de admisiones de cada recinto para recibir más informaciones. Hay muchos colegios universitarios que van a venir a RINEC, ya sea en persona o en presentaciones virtuales como es esta. También es posible que la mayor parte de recintos tienen en su página de internet, tienen la oportunidad del estudiante de ver un video de la escuela, pueden participar en información, en sesiones o talleres de información que están por la escuela, pueden tener una entrevista, o sea que hay muchas opciones que el estudiante lo puede hacer en persona o lo puede hacer virtualmente. y para poder entonces conseguir más información de los recintos del cual él o ella están interesados. Next. Y aquí es una lista de recursos. Algo que se me olvidó mencionar al principio, pero creo que lo dijimos, es que esta presentación se la voy a enviar en español para que se le haga más fácil tener la información, pero aquí tenemos una lista de recursos que están a su disposición para conseguir más información. Next. Y quiero hablar un poquitito de ayuda financiera, porque quiero que también todo el mundo entienda que hay mucha ayuda financiera para poder asistir a los estudiantes para pagar sus estudios. Y en el estado de Nueva York tenemos la fortuna donde no importa qué tipo de visa o qué tipo de situación inmigratoria tiene el estudiante, hay ayuda financiera para todo el mundo. Ayuda financiera tienen varias áreas y yo usualmente hago un taller de ayuda financiera en español en el otoño, pero quiero pues que sepan que hay ayuda financiera a nivel federal, a nivel estatal, que el tener dinero o no tener dinero no es una razón por la cual el estudiante no pueda ingresar a universidades. Así que por favor recuerden que hay mucha ayuda financiera y parte de ese proceso de seleccionar una institución es también ver qué tipo de ayuda financiera o becas existen. Next. Y aquí tenemos información de cómo solicitar ayuda financiera. Como le mencioné, es información que le vamos a dar luego. Y recuerden que es algo que el estudiante y la familia lo hace cuando el estudiante está en el grado 12. No es algo que usted pueda empezar a solicitar ahora. Tiene que esperar que el estudiante esté en el grado 12 para entonces solicitar ayuda financiera. Next. Next. Evan. Can you hear me? We could go on to the next slide.
I can hear you, Richard.
Okay.
Sorry, he lost Wi-Fi.
No worries.
I'm gonna
Okay.
present it. Hold on.
Disculpen, tenemos un poquito de dificultad técnica, que es algo que en este mundo que estamos, pues sucede todo el tiempo. Ok. Y eso concluye la presentación formal. Ahora estamos, si hay alguna pregunta que podamos contestar para usted, por favor, envíela por correo electrónico. Y señorita Whiting, si usted podría repetir su correo electrónico, se lo agradezco.
Richard,
Yes.
what you need to know what's next?
Yeah, I was asking Nadia if she could put in the...
Yes, lo siento.
Okay.
El
No.
correo electrónico es N de Nadia, W, H, I de Italia, T, I de Italia, N, G, @rhineck.org. Si tienen cualquier pregunta, todavía no hemos recibido ninguna pregunta y estamos en vivo ahora mismo para contestar a cualquier pregunta que tengan.
Gracias.
De nada.
Did you get through all of your slides there? I think you did,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
Okay.
Recuerden I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So there don't appear to be any questions. Correct, Ms. Whiting?
You're
Okay.
muted.
I heard her through her. Richard, do you have any final closing words for our guests?
So, quiero repetirle que por favor tomen ventaja de todos los recursos que existen en la escuela. Todos los estudiantes tienen la oportunidad de tener una cita con un consejero. Usted como padre tiene la misma oportunidad y no hay razón que usted tenga una pregunta que no que tenga cualquier inquietud. Por favor, utilice los recursos que existen. Para eso estamos y queremos que cada estudiante tenga la oportunidad de ingresar a la universidad y continuar sus estudios, porque es muy importante y no importa qué tipo de documentación tenga el estudiante. En el estado de Nueva York, por ejemplo, hay muchos recursos a nivel universitario para asistir a todos los estudiantes.
Gracias, señor Alvarez.
A la orden, a la orden. Nadia, did I leave anything out or you're muted again? Sorry.
Take Mike.
Lo siento. Muchísimas gracias de nuevo a todos los padres que han venido y nos han acompañado esta noche. Les mandaremos, como les dijo el señor Álvarez, la presentación en español cuando lo recibamos, para que lo puedan mirar y usar.
Gracias. Buenas noches to everyone.
Hasta noche.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rachel.
Be well, everybody.